Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'll be covering the cases exclusively from the 90s, but only the ones I haven't covered before. I'll also be highlighting some of the most well-known cases from that era, but only as a sort of a reminder that, oh, this happened too. And these will only take 10 to 20 seconds each. And one more thing is that I'll be starting the cases in a different way in this video. I'll start by giving a brief teaser or a hint to build curiosity before diving into the details. And that's it for the intro. Now let's start the video. Enjoy. One night in 1993, at around 3:30 a.m., police were searching the side of a road, not for a person, but for a man's private thing that had been thrown out of a moving car. What unfolded shocked the whole country. This is the case of Lorena Bobbitt, June 23, 1993. John Wayne Bobbitt grew up in Niagara Falls, New York. His mother had problems with drugs, and his father was not around. John was raised by his aunt and uncle. As a young boy, he liked sports and later joined the Marine Corps. Lorena Bobbitt was born in Ecuador. When she was 7, her family moved to Venezuela. In 1986, Lorena came to Virginia on a student visa. John and Lorena met at a Marine Corps dance. John's parents told him not to marry her, but he didn't listen. They got married on June 18, 1989. Lorena was 24 and John was 26. At first, they lived in a house, but they lost it and moved to a small apartment in Manassas, Virginia. After they married, their relationship became very bad. Lorena said John hurt her, forced her to engage in intimate activities she didn't like, and pressured her to have an abortion, even though she was Catholic and didn't believe in it. She also didn't believe in divorce, so she felt stuck. John said Lorena was jealous and would attack him, and if she got hurt, it was only because he was trying to stop her from hitting him. Both of them agreed they had money problems. John kept losing jobs, while Lorena worked in a nail salon and supported them. The police came to their apartment several times because of fights. Lorena even got arrested for shoplifting and taking money from her boss, though she paid it back. A few days before the famous incident, Lorena told people that John was hurting her and went to the police to get a protective order. But she didn't want to wait for the paperwork. At the same time, John said he wanted a divorce, which led to more fights. On the night of June 23, 1993, John went out drinking and came home around 3:15 a.m. Lorena said John assaulted her when he got home. John gave different stories about what happened. Sometimes he said they didn't have any intimate moments. Sometimes he said they did, but it was consensual. After this, Lorena went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, went back to the bedroom, and injured John in a very sensitive area. She ran out of the apartment with the knife in one hand and the severed piece in the other. While driving, she threw it out of the car window because it was hard to drive while holding it. She went to her workplace and told her boss what happened. The police found what had been severed, placed it on ice, and took it to the hospital, where doctors were able to reattach it. Lorena told the police at first that she did it because John was selfish in bed and didn't care about her feelings. Later, she said she didn't remember attacking him. John was charged with assault, but was found not guilty. Lorena was charged with malicious wounding, but was found not guilty because the jury believed she acted out of insanity. She spent about 45 days in a mental hospital and was released. They divorced in 1995. Lorena was later arrested for hitting her mother, but was acquitted. She eventually found a new partner and had a child. John had many problems after the incident. He was arrested several times for hurting women, went to jail, and had health problems. He even worked at a business in Nevada that catered to adults for some time. This case became very famous and got a lot of media attention. Some people saw Lorena as a hero for standing up to abuse, while others thought she went too far. Both John and Lorena hurt each other in many ways, and their story became an example of a very toxic relationship. Jeffrey Dahmer was arrested in 1991. He was a serial killer and cannibal who murdered several men and kept them in his apartment. Most people already know his story, one of the most disturbing cases of the decade. What police found in his apartment made headlines all over the world. She was just a little girl at a sleepover, giggling about pop stars, arguing over where to sleep. A few hours later, she was crawling barefoot through the cold, unable to speak, trying to save her best friend's life. This is the case of Crystal Searles, December 30th, 1999. Crystal was just a happy little girl, excited to move to Del Rio, Texas, with her mom and two younger sisters. She was especially happy because her best friend, Katie, lived right next door. On December 30th, 1999, Crystal stayed at Katie's house for a sleepover. The girls stayed up late, giggling, talking about their favorite singers like Britney Spears and NSYNC, and arguing about where to sleep. It was supposed to be a fun night, but around 3 in the morning, Crystal woke up to a horrible scream. At first, she didn't know what was happening. Then she saw a scary man with messy dark hair, a big beard, and cold, mean eyes. He was holding Katie with one hand over her mouth and a knife to her neck. Katie told Crystal to go get her mom, but before she could move, the man attacked Katie with a knife, hurting her neck and striking her repeatedly. She collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Crystal was terrified but stayed very quiet, pretending to sleep so the man wouldn't notice her. But when he was leaving, he saw her lying on the top bunk. He came back, told her to move her hands from her neck, and then attacked her on the neck as well. Somehow, Crystal stayed alive. She fell to the floor, pretending to be dead, and waited until the man left. When she was sure he was gone, she crawled to Katie, who was still gasping, but then went quiet. Crystal realized she needed to find help before it was too late. Even though her throat was hurt and she couldn't talk, she crawled outside in the cold, barefoot and in pajamas, and walked toward the nearest house with a light on. She banged on the door until a man opened it. She couldn't speak, so she wrote messages saying the Harris family, Katie's family, needed help and begged them to hurry. She even wrote this note asking if she will even live or not. She was rushed to the hospital by helicopter. Doctors found that her windpipe and vocal cords were cut. She couldn't talk but managed to tell the police what happened by writing on paper. She even gave a description of the man, and a sketch artist drew his face. A family friend recognized the man as Tommy Lynn Sells. Police arrested Tommy 2 days later at his trailer. Strangely, he didn't fight or run away. In fact, he even said, "I'm glad I finally got caught." He confessed to killing many people and showed police exactly what he did that night. He even admitted to killing at least 22 people over 20 years. 9 months later, Crystal had to testify in court. She was very scared because she had to sit near Tommy and tell everyone what he did. But she stayed strong, remembering Katie and wearing a special ring another survivor gave her for courage. She told the jury how Tommy attacked them and how she pretended to be dead to survive. Because of Crystal's bravery, the jury found Tommy Lynn Sells guilty of murder and gave him the death penalty. Crystal helped stop him from hurting anyone else. Even though she lost her best friend and went through something very sad and scary, Crystal grew up to be a strong and caring person. She became close to her sisters, finished school, and honored Katie's memory every day. Aileen Wuornos was caught in 1991. She worked on the streets and killed 7 men and said it was in self-defense. Her case got a lot of attention at the time and was later turned into movies and documentaries. What if a small mistake, like going to the wrong house on Halloween, leads to your death? This is the case of Yoshihiro Hattori, October 17, 1992. Yoshihiro Hattori was a 16-year-old boy from Japan. He was staying in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, as part of an American student exchange program. On the night of October 17, 1992, at around 8:30 p.m., Hattori and his host brother Webb Haymaker, who was also 16, were going to a Halloween party for Japanese exchange students. The boys made a mistake with the address because 2 numbers in the address were switched. They ended up at the wrong house. The house they went to belonged to the Pierce family, who actually lived 6 houses away from the house where the party was. Hattori was wearing a white suit and was dressed as John Travolta from the movie Saturday Night Fever. Haymaker had a neck brace and bandages because of an injury. They were not part of a costume. The two boys rang the doorbell at the Pierce home, but no one answered. They started walking back toward the street. Inside, Bonnie Pierce heard the doorbell. She went to the carport door, which was on the side of the house, and looked out. One of her 3 children was with her. When she opened the door, she saw the 2 boys outside. She later said she was startled when they began to walk toward her quickly. She slammed the door shut and yelled for her husband to get his gun. Outside, Webb tried to explain to Mrs. Pierce that they were there for a party, but she had already shut the door. The boys continued walking toward the street. Inside, Rodney Pierce, Bonnie's husband, was watching TV and talking on the phone. When he heard his wife yelling for him to get his gun, he didn't ask questions. He went to their bedroom, got a .44 Magnum handgun, and stepped outside the carport door. By this time, Hattori and Haymaker were already near the sidewalk. When they saw Mr. Pierce come out, Hattori began walking toward him. He tried to explain that they were looking for the party, but his English wasn't very good. Rodney Pierce said he saw Hattori walking around his truck and coming toward him in a way that seemed aggressive. He raised his gun and told him to freeze. Haymaker shouted for Hattori to stop, but Hattori kept walking toward Mr. Pierce. Rodney said he thought Hattori was holding a gun or weapon, but it was actually just a camera. From about 5 feet away, Rodney shot Hattori in the chest area and then ran back inside, slamming the door behind him. Hattori was badly hurt. The bullet had gone through his lung. Haymaker and a neighbor tried to save him, but he died within minutes from blood loss. Rodney Pierce was charged with manslaughter. If convicted, he could have faced up to 40 years in prison. His lawyers argued he acted in self-defense because he thought Hattori was a threat. Prosecutors argued that Hattori and Haymaker were not threatening. They said Pierce used too much force and could have avoided the shooting by staying inside. During the trial, some people testified that Hattori often walked quickly toward people and waved his arms because his English was poor. Even though Haymaker yelled for him to stop, Hattori may not have understood. After a 7-day trial, the jury decided in just 3 hours that Rodney Pierce was not guilty. This decision caused a lot of debate about gun laws in both the United States and Japan. Later, Hattori's family sued Rodney Pierce in civil court and won. They were awarded $650,000, but they only received $100,000 because of his insurance policy. The Hattori family used the money to create 2 charitable funds in their son's name, one for U.S. students visiting Japan and one for groups that work for gun control. Almost 1 million Americans and 1.7 million Japanese signed a petition calling for stronger gun control in the U.S. The petition was given to President Bill Clinton in 1993. Later that year, the Brady Bill was passed. It required a 5-day waiting period and background checks for people buying guns in the U.S. In 1996, Ted Kaczynski, known as the Unabomber, was arrested after years of hiding. He was a former math professor who sent bombs through the mail to people involved in technology. His arrest ended one of the longest manhunts in FBI history. He said he was a 500-year-old vampire named Visago. He carved symbols into his skin, drank blood with his friends, and believed he was part of an ancient clan. But in 1996, fantasy turned into murder. This is the case of Rod Farrell and the Vampire Clan, November 25, 1996. Rod was born in Murray, Kentucky in 1980. His mother, Sandra, was only 16 when she had him. His father left to join the military and never came back. Rod had a very hard childhood. He was hurt when he was around 5, and his family never gave him a stable or loving home. Sandra worked as a dancer and even introduced Rod to dark vampire stories, movies, and games when he was young. They watched Dracula movies and read vampire comics together. Rod grew up obsessed with vampires and dark, gothic things. His bedroom was filled with creepy objects like broken glass, upside-down crosses, and even hooks and chains. He carved an upside-down cross into his chest and called himself a 500-year-old vampire named Visago. He also played vampire role-playing games and believed he was really a vampire. By the time he was a teenager, Rod had formed a group of friends who felt like outsiders too. They called themselves a vampire family. They met in an old abandoned building in the woods they called the Vampire Hotel. There, they drank each other's blood, did rituals, used drugs, and pretended to be vampires. Some of the members of the group were Scott Anderson, his best friend, Chastity Kesey, his girlfriend, Dana Cooper, another friend, and Heather Wendorf. Heather became very close to Rod. She told him she was unhappy at home and that her parents were mean to her. Rod became obsessed with her and decided to save her from her parents. On November 25, 1996, Rod and his group drove from Kentucky to Florida, where Heather lived. Heather gave Rod the keys to her house so they could steal her family's car and run away to New Orleans to start their vampire life together. But instead of just taking the car, Rod and Scott broke into the house while Heather's parents were home. Rod killed Heather's father by hitting him more than 20 times with a crowbar. When Heather's mother came in and tried to stop him by throwing hot coffee at him, he killed her too. Rod later said he hurt her until the damage was beyond recognition. Afterward, Rod and Scott stole jewelry, credit cards, and the family car. Heather didn't know her parents had been killed until later. 4 days after the murders, the police caught Rod and his group. Rod first denied everything and claimed another vampire gang framed him. But with so much evidence against him, he finally confessed. He was sentenced to death, which later was changed to life in prison because he was under 18. His friends also went to prison, though they got lighter sentences. People everywhere were shocked by the case. Reporters from all over the world came to cover it. Rod said he believed drinking blood was like a holy ritual. Before the murders, he was unkind to animals at a shelter and caused harm to many dogs. Over time, he admitted he had chosen the dark path because it felt exciting. Rod's mother, Sandra, also caused a scandal. She wrote love letters to a 14-year-old boy and even set up a shrine to him in her home. Experts who studied Rod said he was deeply hurt in his childhood and by his mother's behavior, but they agreed that nothing excused the terrible murders he committed. Rod remains in prison today, serving his life sentence. In 1997, fashion designer Gianni Versace was shot and killed outside his home in Miami. The killer was Andrew Cunanan, who had already murdered several other people across the country. In 2009, a horror movie called Jennifer's Body showed a rock band sacrificing a girl to Satan in hopes of becoming famous. But what many people don't know is that something eerily similar happened in real life, 14 years earlier. This is the heartbreaking case of Elise Poller, July 22, 1995. The movie Jennifer's Body came out in 2009 and starred Megan Fox. In the movie, Megan plays a high school girl who becomes possessed by a demon after a rock band tries to sacrifice her to Satan, but their ritual goes wrong. Over time, the movie gained a lot of fans, and some people even saw it as a clever take on how women are treated in horror stories. But many people noticed that the movie has some strange similarities to a real-life murder case, the tragic story of Elise Poller. Elise Poller was just 15 years old when her life was taken in a horrible way. Elise was born on April 24, 1980, in Templeton, California. Her family later moved to Arroyo Grande. Her parents said she was a great kid, though she sometimes acted out like most teenagers. She was independent, very friendly, and liked to get to know everyone at school. Elise played sports, sang in the church choir, and loved acting. She dreamed of becoming an actress someday. However, like some teens, she also experimented with alcohol and marijuana. This got her into trouble at school, and she was even suspended for 5 days for underage drinking. Her parents became worried about her behavior and sent her to a recovery center for help. While at the center, she met a boy named Jacob DeLashmutt, who she already knew from school. Jacob introduced her to his friends, Joseph Fiorella and Royce Casey. All three boys had troubled lives and were considered outcasts. Jacob was a talented artist but struggled with drug use. Joseph and Royce were also known for using drugs and not fitting in at school. The three boys played in a band called Hatred. They were inspired by the heavy metal band Slayer and became interested in Satanism and dark rituals. Joseph seemed especially obsessed with the idea of worshiping Satan. He even collected books and pamphlets about it. One day, Joseph came up with a disturbing idea. He told the others that if they sacrificed an innocent girl to Satan, he would give their band fame and power. They thought this would help their music career and make them better performers. They all agreed to the plan and decided Elise would be their victim. On July 22, 1995, Jacob called Elise and invited her to hang out with him and his friends at a eucalyptus grove near her home. Since she already knew them, she agreed. She sneaked out of her house that night, not knowing what was about to happen. At first, the group talked and smoked together, but when she let her guard down, Jacob attacked her by wrapping a belt around her neck. Royce held her down while Joseph attacked her with a knife. All three of them took turns hurting her, while she cried out for her mother and prayed for help. She eventually passed away from her injuries. They left her in the grove, and her body wasn't found for 8 months. During that time, the boys even bragged about what they had done to other people, but no one believed them. The case finally broke open when Royce, who had become a Christian and felt guilty, went to the police. He told them everything and showed them where to find her body. All three boys were arrested and admitted to playing a part in her death. They were between 15 and 17 years old at the time of the murder. In court, they all said they were influenced by Slayer's music. They were sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. Elise's family later tried to sue Slayer, claiming their songs encouraged the boys to kill, but the lawsuit was dismissed. The judge said the band could not be held responsible. Elise's death caused her family a lot of pain for many years. They also suffered financially because her father struggled to work after losing her. Whether it was because of dark music or a twisted obsession, what matters is that Elise's young life was taken in the cruelest way, just as it was beginning. The O.J. Simpson trial took place between 1994 and 1995. He was a former football star accused of killing his ex-wife Nicole Brown and her friend Ron Goldman. It became one of the most famous court cases ever, with the verdict dividing the public. In the end, he was found not guilty in the criminal trial. In the summer of 1997, an 18-year-old college student flew to San Francisco to chase a dream. She had a scholarship, 2 jobs, and a camera slung over her shoulder, ready to explore the world. But just weeks after she arrived, she vanished without a trace. This is the disappearance of Kristen Modafferi, June 23, 1997. Kristen Deborah Modafferi was born on June 1, 1979, in Danbury, Connecticut. Her parents were Bob and Debbie Modafferi, and she had 3 sisters named Allison, Megan, and Lauren. When Kristen was 10 years old, her family moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, to start a new chapter in their lives. Kristen was very smart even as a young girl. She did so well in school that she skipped a grade. She later earned a full scholarship to study at North Carolina State University. After her first year of college, she wanted to spend her summer doing something exciting. Kristen decided to go to San Francisco, a city she loved because of a trip she took there with her family in 1994. Her mother was worried and didn't want her to go, but her father supported her decision, thinking it would be a good experience. Kristen planned carefully and signed up for a photography course at the University of California, Berkeley. She also found a place to live in Oakland by posting on message boards online. On her 18th birthday, June 1, 1997, she packed her bags and flew to California. Soon after arriving, she got 2 summer jobs, one at Spinelli's coffee shop in the Crocker Galleria and another at a cafe. Kristen worked hard, waking up very early every morning to catch the train to San Francisco for her 7 a.m. shift. After finishing work at 3 p.m., she would explore the city and take pictures with her camera. On June 23, 1997, Kristen followed her usual routine. She asked her coworkers how to get to Land's End Beach, a place she had visited a few days earlier. At 3 p.m., she left Spinelli's wearing her uniform and green backpack. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. When Kristen didn't show up for her photography class the next day, nobody raised the alarm right away because her new friends didn't know her habits very well. But 3 days later, her roommates called her parents to say she hadn't been seen. Bob and Debbie flew to San Francisco immediately and hired a private investigator to help find her. Her family put up flyers all over the city and handed them out to people. At first, the police thought she might have run away, but by June 30th, it was officially a missing person case. Investigators learned that Kristen had been enjoying the city's nightlife. She went to a concert one night, missed her train, and stayed overnight at a young man's apartment. He was later questioned and cleared of suspicion. A coworker thought they saw her after she left work that day, talking to a blonde woman, but they weren't sure. Police dogs tracked Kristen's scent from the bus stop near the Galleria to Sutro Heights Park, close to Land's End Beach. But after that, the trail went cold. Later, investigators found a magazine in her room with a personal ad circled, but they couldn't figure out if Kristen had written it or planned to reply to it. An anonymous caller claimed she had been killed by 2 women and left by a wooden bridge, but the women named were cleared of involvement. In 2015, a cadaver dog detected human remains at Kristen's old residence in Oakland. Tests showed DNA matching her family, but police were slow to investigate further. Kristen's case inspired Kristen's Law, passed in 2000, which helped fund searches for missing adults. Unfortunately, that funding stopped in 2005. In 2022, Kristen's father, Bob, died without ever knowing what happened to her. Her mother said she hoped he and Kristen were now together. Kristen's disappearance remains a mystery, and a $50,000 reward is still offered for information about her case. In 1997, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult were found dead in a house in California. They did this because they believed they would leave Earth and join a spaceship following a comet. It became one of the most talked about cult tragedies of the decade. In 1995, a journalist who believed in second chances opened her home and her heart to a man with a violent past. She thought she could help him change. Instead, she vanished without a trace. This is the murder of Louise Ellis, April 22, 1995. Brett Morgan grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. He was married and divorced twice. Both marriages ended because Brett was violent. He often lost his temper and hurt his partners. Brett had a long history of getting into trouble. He was arrested many times for crimes like theft, forgery, and having stolen property. Then, on November 3, 1978, Brett did something much worse. He killed a 21-year-old woman who worked on the streets by strangling her in a hotel room. He was found guilty of manslaughter and sent to prison for 10 years. Police also thought he might have killed 2 other women in the 1970s, but they never charged him for those crimes. In 1993, a journalist named Louise Ellis was working on a case where a man named David Milgaard was wrongly jailed for killing a woman named Gail Miller. The real killer was Larry Fisher, who once shared a prison cell with Brett Morgan. Brett testified in court against Larry. Louise was in the courtroom and was impressed that Brett spoke up to help justice. She thought maybe he had changed. Louise wanted to talk to him, but Brett was still in prison for robbery and fraud. Louise began writing letters to Brett, and soon they started a romantic relationship. When Brett got out of prison, he moved in with Louise in Ottawa. She believed she could help him become a better man, but it didn't take long before things went wrong. Brett became violent again. Louise wrote in her diary that Brett punched holes in doors and poured beer on her head. In January 1995, Brett moved out. That same month, he faked a $7,000 check using Louise's account. The next month, he faked another one for $5,400 check. He also became a suspect in a burglary, so he moved back in with Louise. Louise gave him $20,000 and hoped he would pay her back, but he never did. On April 22, 1995, she planned to visit her ex-boyfriend John for his daughter's birthday. But before she could leave, Brett killed her in the bathroom. He wrapped her body in a shower curtain, put it in her car, and drove to a forest in Quebec to hide it near John's home, possibly to make it seem like John had done it. On April 23rd, when Louise didn't show up, John called Brett. Brett reported her missing. Louise's friend found her car 2 days later. Inside were her purse, bank card, and overnight bag. Brett acted sad and tried to help with the search. He even spoke to the news, pretending to care. But the police soon suspected Brett. They learned he used Louise's bank card to take out $280 just hours after he said she had left to see John. Security cameras showed it was Brett who took the money. He also had a new shower curtain at home, saying the old one was ruined by cleaning. Still, police didn't have enough proof to arrest him. That's when a woman named Marie Parent came in. She was studying to become a private investigator and offered to help Brett find Louise. Secretly, she didn't trust him. She worked with police and wore a wire. Marie tricked Brett by pretending she believed John killed Louise. She asked Brett to think like John and guess where the body might be. Brett led her to the forest where he had hidden Louise. On July 7, 1995, Marie and Brett went searching. Brett led her within feet of the body. Marie saw it, and later, Brett told police where to find it. Police arrested him right away. In 1998, Brett was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with parole possible after 25 years. But Brett didn't live long. He died in prison from hepatitis C just 2 months into his sentence. This case shows that while helping others is good, getting romantically involved with a violent person can be very dangerous. Louise believed she could change Brett, but sadly she became his next victim. Eric Rudolph and the Olympic Park, 1996. During the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, a bomb went off in a public park, killing one person and injuring many others. The man behind it, Eric Rudolph, wasn't caught until years later. He was also linked to other similar acts and became one of the FBI's most wanted. In 1998, in the small town of Jasper, Texas, a man accepted a ride from 3 other men and never made it home. What followed was one of the most brutal crimes in modern American history. This is the murder of James Byrd Jr., June 7, 1998. James Byrd Jr. was born on May 2, 1949, in Jasper, Texas. He was the third of 8 children in his family. His parents, Stella and James Byrd Sr., were active in their local church. His mother taught Sunday school, and his father was a church deacon. James loved music and played the piano and sang at church. He graduated from Jasper High School in 1967. That year was the last time the school had separated black and white students. Even though James did well in school, he didn't go to college like his sisters. He got married a few years later and had 3 children named Jamie, Renee, and Ross. James worked different jobs, including selling vacuum cleaners. He also had a hard time with alcohol and went to prison for a few years for stealing small things. In the 1990s, he moved back to Jasper and tried to turn his life around. He joined Alcoholics Anonymous and wanted to do better. His friends and family said he was a kind man, full of joy, who loved to make people smile with his music and personality. On the morning of June 7, 1998, James left his parents' house and accepted a ride from 3 white men named Sean Berry, Lawrence Brewer, and John King. They did not take him home. Instead, they drove him to a quiet, empty area outside of town. There, they painted his face and treated him in horrible ways. Then, they tied a chain around his ankles and hooked it to the back of their truck. They dragged him down the road for almost 3 miles. James stayed alive during most of it. He tried to lift his head and fight to stay alive. He only died when the truck turned, and he struck a concrete drain, resulting in traumatic disarticulation of the arm, shoulder, and the head. After doing this, the 3 men left what was left of James's body in front of a black church, and then went to a barbecue like nothing had happened. A person driving by saw James's body the next morning and called the police. Investigators found a wrench with Barry's name on it and a lighter that said Possum, which was King's prison nickname. They also found 81 spots along the road where different parts were found. The crime shocked the whole country. Because Brewer and King were known to be hateful, it was ruled a hate crime. The FBI got involved right away. All three men were arrested. Sean Barry was given life in prison. Lawrence Brewer and John King were given the death penalty. Brewer was executed in 2011. King was executed in 2019. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist, 1990. In 1990, two men dressed as police officers stole 13 pieces of art from a museum in Boston. The stolen works were worth hundreds of millions, and none of them have ever been found. It's still the biggest art heist in U.S. history. A kind family of four stopped at a Tennessee rest area to stretch their legs. Minutes later, they were forced into their own van at gunpoint, and only one of them would make it out alive. The Lillelid family was known to be kind and caring. Vidar was born in Bergen, Norway, in May 1962. He was the youngest of four children. In his 20s, he moved to Florida, where he met Delphina, a woman from New Jersey born in 1969. They got married in 1989 and had their first child, a daughter named Tabitha, in 1990. Wanting a quieter life away from the city, they moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. In 1995, they had a son named Peter. By the end of 1996, they had moved into their dream home in the Powell area. Vidar worked as a bellman at a hotel, while Delphina stayed home to homeschool their kids. They were deeply religious and followed the Jehovah's Witness faith. On April 6, 1997, the family attended a religious convention in Johnson City. On their way back, they stopped at a rest area along Interstate 81, so Peter, who had an earache, could walk with his dad. Delphina and Tabitha went to use the restroom and talked briefly with a friend they saw there. While at the rest area, Vidar began talking to a group of young people about his religion. At first, the group listened politely, but then everything changed. One of the young men, 20-year-old Joseph Risner, pulled out a gun and told the family they just wanted the van and no one would get hurt. The group, Joseph, Jason Bryant, Natasha Cornett, Karen Howell, Edward Mullins, and Crystal Sturgill, all under 20, had all come from Kentucky and were running from troubled pasts. Most had experienced neglect and addiction. Some were obsessed with witchcraft and dark rituals. The family was forced into their van and driven to a remote road in Greene County, Tennessee. The group followed in their own car, which later got stuck. That car was abandoned, and they escaped in the family's van after what happened next. That night, two nearby residents heard gunshots and called 911. Police arrived and found the abandoned car. In a ditch nearby, they discovered the bodies of the family: Vidar, Delphina, Tabitha, and Peter. It was a horrifying scene. Tabitha and Peter were lying on top of their parents. Miraculously, Peter was still alive. A deputy picked him up, and he cried out. He was rushed to the hospital and survived, though he had serious injuries. Sadly, Tabitha was taken to the hospital too, but died the next day. An investigation quickly led police to the suspects. Less than 2 days later, the group was stopped at the U.S.-Mexico border in Arizona. They were arrested. Some of the family's personal items, like Tabitha's photo and a house key, were found with the group. The group was returned to Tennessee to face charges. In February 1998, all six pleaded guilty to murder and attempted murder to avoid the death penalty. Even though each of them told different stories about who did the shooting, the truth remains unclear. Some blamed Jason, the youngest, while others said it was Joseph or Edward. Crystal claimed she never left the car during the attack. In the end, all six were given long prison sentences. In 1997, Ennis Cosby, the son of actor Bill Cosby, was shot and killed during a robbery attempt in Los Angeles. He was just 27 years old and studying to become a teacher. The killer, a teenager named Mikhail Markasev, was later caught, convicted of murder, and sentenced to life in prison. On a warm night in June 1992, 3 women vanished from a quiet home in Springfield, Missouri. There were no signs of a struggle, no cries for help, and no clear answers. Over 30 years later, their disappearance remains one of the most chilling and unexplained cases in American history. Cheryl Levitt was a 42-year-old hairdresser. She had just moved into a new house with her 19-year-old daughter, Susie Streeter. Susie had just finished high school and was excited about her future. She wanted to be a hairstylist like her mom. Susie was very close to her mom, and they had a strong bond. Susie's best friend, Stacy McCall, was also 18 and had known Susie since childhood. It was their graduation week, and they had spent time going to parties and celebrating. On the night of the graduation, Susie and Stacy planned to sleep at their friend Janelle's house. But Janelle's house was full of family, so the girls decided to go back to Susie's house instead. Janelle later said she wished she had begged them to stay. The next morning, Janelle woke up but didn't get a call from Susie or Stacy. She tried calling them, but no one answered. She got worried and went over to Susie's house. When she arrived, she noticed the glass cover on the porch light was broken, but the bulb was still fine. She knocked and yelled for them, but got no answer. So she went inside. At first, the house looked normal, but something didn't feel right. The family dog, Cinnamon, was very upset and barking a lot. Also, Susie and her mom's cigarettes and lighters were still on the table. They never left without them. This made Janelle even more worried. Stacy's mom, Janice, couldn't reach her daughter either. She drove to the house and called the police. The police said they would file a missing persons report. But what shocked Janice the most was when the officer asked her to get their dental records. That made her fear the worst. The women seemed to have vanished without a trace. Weeks passed with no answers, then a strange tip came in. A man named Robert Cox became a person of interest. He had a history of crime. In 1978, he was charged in the murder of a young woman in Florida. He was found guilty and sent to death row, but later his sentence was overturned due to lack of evidence. After that, he returned to Springfield, Missouri. Police looked into Cox's whereabouts on the night the women disappeared. He said he was at a golf event and then stayed at his parents' house. His girlfriend also said he took her and her child to church the next morning. So police could not prove he was lying. Years went by. In 1995, Cox gave a chilling interview while he was in prison in Texas. He said he knew the 3 women were dead. He didn't say how he knew, but he seemed confident. He also said their bodies were close to Springfield. Some people believe Cox was trying to get attention. Others think he might know more than he's saying. Police never charged him in the case. Over the next 19 years, investigators followed more than 5,000 tips and searched many places, including woods across the Ozarks. Still, no trace of the women was ever found. To this day, the mystery of the missing women from Springfield remains unsolved. In 1999, 2 students carried out a tragic attack at Columbine High School in Colorado. They took the lives of 13 people before their... It became one of the most heartbreaking and widely discussed school tragedies in U.S. history. He was just 4 years old, walking to a summer park program by himself for the very first time. But Derek Roby never made it, and what happened to him in a quiet New York town left even seasoned investigators stunned. This is the murder of Derek Roby, August 2nd, 1993. Eric Smith was born in Steuben County, New York on January 22nd, 1980. In 1993, he lived in the small town of Savona, New York, with his parents and younger sister. Savona had only about 800 people. Eric's older sister had already moved out. Eric had a hard childhood. He had speech problems and threw big temper tantrums where he would bang his head on the floor. He was held back in school and sometimes acted out, like hitting a tree with his hands. Other kids bullied him because of his red hair, freckles, glasses, and ears that stuck out. Derek Roby was another young boy who lived in Savona. He was born on October 2nd, 1988, and lived with his parents, Dale and Doreen. On the morning of August 2nd, 1993, Derek's mom let him walk alone to a park nearby for the first time. She watched him leave at about 9:12 a.m., carrying his lunch. At the same time, Eric was riding his bike near the park. He had been upset, and had even rammed his bike into a picnic table earlier. Eric saw Derek walking and called out. Derek turned around, and Eric asked if he wanted to take a shortcut to the park. At first, Derek said no, but Eric convinced him. Eric led Derek to a quiet area behind some bushes. Once they were alone, Eric attacked him. He strangled Derek until Derek stopped moving. Then Eric emptied Derek's lunch, smashed his banana, and placed a napkin and a plastic bag in his mouth. During the struggle, Derek bit Eric's finger. Eric then struck Derek in the head with a larger rock. Finally, Eric left Derek on a pile of rocks and left. Later that morning, after a storm, Derek's mom went to the park but was told Derek never arrived. She called the police, who found Derek's body around 3:45 p.m. They said Derek died from head injuries and choking. 3 days later, Eric's mom brought him to the police because she thought he might have information. Eric said he had been at the park but didn't see Derek. Later, the police noticed holes in his story. On August 8th, Eric finally confessed to his family that he killed Derek. His family told the police, and Eric gave a full confession. He was charged with second-degree murder. In 1994, at age 14, he was found guilty and sentenced to 9 years to life in prison. Over the years, Eric was denied parole many times. At one hearing, he even said that strangling Derek felt good and claimed he didn't see Derek as a boy, but as a bully. Finally, in 2021, after his 11th parole hearing, he was approved for release. He got out of prison on February 1st, 2022, but will remain on parole for life. Eric's case raised many questions. Some believed bullying and mental health problems made him act out. Experts said he showed signs of being sadistic, enjoying the pain he caused. Even though he was released, many believe he should always be watched closely because of what he did. In 1995, a truck exploded outside a federal building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people. The man behind it, Timothy McVeigh, was angry at the U.S. government. It was the deadliest attack carried out on American soil by its own citizens at the time. She was a young mother starting over after escaping an abusive marriage. But just days before Christmas, Lindsay Quay vanished. What followed was a heartbreaking story of lies, loss, and a killer hiding in plain sight. She was a mother of 2 young children and had a husband named Mitchell Quay, who was 23 at the time. Her sudden disappearance shocked everyone. Mitchell quickly turned to the media, hoping someone might help find Lindsay. But soon after, he made a discovery that changed everything. Born in 1977, she was the youngest of 6 kids. She had her first child at 17. After that relationship ended, she met Mitchell, who worked in a casino. The two fell in love fast and got married only 5 weeks after meeting. They had 2 children, Robin and Jack, and from the outside, it looked like they had a happy family. But inside their home, things were very different. Lindsay faced abuse from Mitchell. A neighbor once saw her while pregnant, running out of the house after being attacked. She also kept a diary where she wrote about Mitchell leaving and coming back many times. By the summer of 1998, Lindsay finally left him for good. With the help of a domestic violence group, she got a new house on Stamford Road. She was also given a panic alarm for safety. But somehow, Mitchell managed to come back into her life. In December 1998, Lindsay was last seen alive. Oddly, Mitchell never told anyone she was missing. It wasn't until early February 1999, more than 50 days later, that a social worker raised the alarm. Mitchell claimed that Lindsay had left on Christmas Day after a night out. He said she just took some clothes and never returned. But police and her family didn't believe this. They knew she loved her kids and would never just walk away from them. The media followed the case closely. Mitchell even appeared on TV asking for help to find Lindsay. But many people felt uneasy around him. He showed no sadness, which made people even more suspicious. He later said he had seen Lindsay at a local market, but police found no proof of this. Instead, they discovered something else. Mitchell had been faking Lindsay's signature to take her benefit money. In February 1999, he was arrested for fraud but not murder because there wasn't enough evidence at that time. In June 2000, everything changed. A torso was found buried near a roller coaster at Southport's amusement park. Police arrested Mitchell again. The pressure must have been too much for him, because the next day, he confessed. He said that in the early hours of December 16, 1998, Lindsay told him she was leaving. During an argument, he strangled her while their children slept. He hid her body in their home for days. Later, with his brother Elliot's help, they hid her remains in different places. Some were discarded in a landfill and sadly were never recovered. In January 2001, Mitchell went to trial. He admitted to killing Lindsay, but said it was an accident. The judge didn't believe him. He was called a liar and a manipulator, someone who killed in a fit of rage and then lied for years. Mitchell Quai remains incarcerated in a closed-security UK prison as of July 2025. His most recent parole hearing in May 2022 resulted in a denial, with the parole board citing concerns over his lack of emotional control, aggressive behavior toward other inmates and staff, and drug use while in custody. In 1999, British TV presenter Jill Dando was shot outside her home in London. Her murder shocked the UK, and for years, no one knew who did it. The case became one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in British crime history. Although Barry George was convicted in 2001, his conviction was overturned in 2008, and the case remains unsolved, with possible motives ranging from a disturbed stalker to a professional hit linked to her work. But no definitive motive has ever been confirmed. She was a teenage cross-country runner with a big smile, a steady boyfriend, and a close-knit family. But one morning in 1995, she was missing, and by afternoon, her body had been found in a remote Texas field. The killer, not a stranger, but someone from her own high school. This is the case of Adrienne Jones, December 4th, 1995. She was well-liked, a good student, worked part-time at a restaurant, and ran on the cross-country team. She lived with her parents and two younger brothers, and they were a very close family. Her parents had some rules to keep her safe, like no phone after 10 p.m. and not allowing her boyfriend Tracy to visit the house. On the morning of December 4th, Adrienne's mom noticed something strange. Adrienne's alarm was ringing, but she wasn't in her bed. Her shoes were still at home, and her bed looked untouched. Worried, her mom called the school and her workplace, but Adrienne wasn't there. That's when she called the police. That same morning, about 10 kilometers away, a farmer noticed a broken fence and found a girl's body in a field. She had been hit in the head and shot. Police sent the body for autopsy and later confirmed it was Adrienne. The town was in shock. The police first spoke to Adrienne's parents. They said the night before had seemed normal. Adrienne did her homework, spoke to her boyfriend on the phone, and also mentioned getting a call from someone named David on her cross-country team. So, the police went to question David Graham. David was a smart, well-behaved 17-year-old with dreams of becoming a pilot. He was also in the Civil Air Patrol. When police asked about the call, David said he didn't call Adrienne and spent the evening studying with his girlfriend. His story checked out, so he was no longer a suspect. Next, they spoke to Tracy, Adrienne's boyfriend. He said she did get another call that night, but told him it was from someone named Brian McMillan, a student who had a crush on Adrienne. He had followed her and made her uncomfortable. Police questioned Brian, but he had mental health and memory problems. At one point, he mentioned Adrienne was hit on the head, a detail not made public. That raised suspicions. He was held for a while, but later passed a lie detector test and was released. The case went cold for several months. Then, in August 1996, police got a call from the Naval Academy in Maryland. A student there, Diane Zamora, had told her roommates that her boyfriend, David Graham, had killed a girl for her. Shocked, the Academy contacted the Mansfield police. Police were surprised to hear David's name again. David and Diane had been dating since 1995. They were both smart and ambitious, and had even gotten engaged. But their relationship was very intense, and Diane was very jealous. She believed David had cheated on her with Adrienne. David had once told Diane that he had been with Adrienne, and Diane became furious. She told David the only way to fix their relationship was to get rid of Adrienne. Shockingly, David agreed. On the night of December 3rd, David picked up Adrienne, saying he needed to talk. Diane was hiding in the car's trunk. When Adrienne got in, they drove to a remote area. Diane jumped out, shouted at Adrienne, and accused her. A fight broke out. Diane hit Adrienne with a weight. Adrienne tried to run but collapsed. David then shot her twice. The two teens cleaned up and acted like nothing happened. But Diane later told others, and David eventually confessed. Both were arrested and tried separately. They were found guilty and sentenced to 40 years in prison. They will be eligible for release in 2036. All three teens had bright futures, but jealousy and anger led to a tragic ending. One life lost, and two others ruined forever. In 1995, members of a cult released deadly sarin gas on the Tokyo subway during rush hour. 13 people died and thousands were injured. The attack was planned by the group's leader, who hoped to derail impending police raids and trigger an end-of-days conspiracy to overthrow the government. It was the start of a new school year, backpacks, football games, dorm move-ins. But by the end of that week, 5 students were dead. A college town filled with excitement had turned into a place of fear. This is the case of Danny Rolling, the Gainesville Ripper, August 1990. When people think of classic horror movies, one of the first that comes to mind is Scream. What many people don't know is that the movie was inspired by a real-life tragedy, the Gainesville student murders that took place in Florida in 1990. While Scream became famous for its scary scenes, the real events had a much deeper and more painful impact on the Gainesville community. In late August 1990, students were returning to the University of Florida for a new school year. The campus was full of life. Students were moving in, going to class, and getting ready for football season. But hidden in the middle of all this excitement was something terrible. The first victims were 18-year-old Sonja Larson and 17-year-old Christina Powell. They lived in an apartment near campus. On August 24th, the killer broke in, attacked, and murdered them. Their bodies were found 2 days later. The next day, the killer entered the apartment of 18-year-old Krista Hoyt. She wasn't home at the time, so he waited for her to return. When she did, he hurt and killed her in a more shocking way than the first two. On August 27th, the last 2 victims were found, Manuel Manny Taboada and Tracy Paulus, both 23 years old and students at UF. The killer fought and killed Manny first, then hurt and murdered Tracy. After the murders, Gainesville was in panic. Nearly 34,000 people left the area, and many students dropped out or transferred to other schools. The university closed for a week. Students who stayed slept in groups, locked their doors, and kept weapons nearby. The once busy and happy campus became quiet and empty. Soon after, police arrested a young man named Edward Humphrey. He lived near the first victims and was known to act strangely. But after DNA testing, police realized he was not the killer. Later, in a nearby town called Ocala, police arrested a man named Danny Rolling for robbing a grocery store. Investigators found that he had committed similar murders in Louisiana. DNA testing confirmed that Rolling was the Gainesville Ripper. He later admitted to the murders. In his interviews, Rolling claimed that a demon named Gemini told him to kill, a story similar to a character from the movie The Exorcist III. In 2006, Danny Rolling was executed for his crimes. Even though time has passed, the memory of the 5 victims lives on. Students and the community created memorials to remember them. One of the most well-known is the 34th Street Wall in Gainesville. The Scream Murder, 1998. In 1998, 2 teenage boys in Florida killed one of their classmates, claiming they were inspired by the movie Scream. The media called it the Scream Murder because of how closely it seemed to follow the film. In Australia, parents still remember the name Mr. Cruel, a masked man who kidnapped girls from their homes, then vanished without a trace. In 1991, one of those girls never came home. This is the unsolved case of that girl. Mr. Cruel's first known crime happened on August 22, 1987, in a place called Lower Plenty. Early in the morning, around 4 a.m., he quietly broke into a family's home. He had both a knife and a small gun. He tied up the parents and locked them in a closet. He tied up the son as well. Then he took the young daughter, but before he left, he also cut the phone line so they couldn't call for help right away. The next incident was on December 27, 1988, in Ringwood. This time, he broke into another home at around 5:30 a.m. He tied up and gagged the parents, and then took their 10-year-old daughter, Sharon Wills. He covered her eyes and drove away with her. Fortunately, he let her go about 18 hours later and left her at a schoolyard where she was found safely. On July 3, 1990, in Canterbury, he broke into a home late at night and took a 13-year-old girl named Nicola Linus. He kept her in another house for about 2 days before letting her go at a power station. The most tragic case happened on April 13, 1991, in Templestowe. That evening, he broke into a house where a 13-year-old girl named Carmen Chan was looking after her younger sisters while their parents were working at their restaurant. Mr. Cruel forced the younger girls into a closet and took Carmen with him. Sadly, she did not come back home. Almost a year later, her remains were found in a field. She had been killed. Police found a message spray-painted on the family car, but they believe this was just a trick to confuse them and not the real reason for the crime. Police believed at first that Carmen might be returned safely, just like the other girls. But this time that did not happen. After her disappearance, police formed a special team called the Spectrum Task Force to try to solve the case and catch Mr. Cruel. They searched tens of thousands of homes, interviewed thousands of people, and followed many leads, but they were not able to find him. Even today, he has not been caught. Investigators believe Mr. Cruel planned his crimes very carefully. He even brought extra clothes to dress the girls in before letting them go, so that the police couldn't use their clothes for evidence. He also seemed to know how to hide his face and avoid leaving clues. 2 of the girls remembered details about the house where they were kept, such as hearing planes flying overhead, which led police to think the house was near the airport. In 2010, police set up another task force after new information came in, and they continue to investigate. Over the years, they have spoken to thousands of possible suspects and checked many homes, but he has stayed hidden. The reward for information that leads to his arrest has grown over time, now standing at $1 million. Mr. Cruel is believed to have kept photos or videos of his crimes and may still be alive today. Police believe he might still collect material online and possibly even talk to children using the internet. This case is one of Australia's most upsetting and puzzling mysteries. Mr. Cruel hurt several families, and one young girl lost her life. Police and the public hope that someday someone will come forward with the right information so that he can finally be caught and brought to justice. In 1999, a woman in Hong Kong was kidnapped and tortured by 3 people over a debt. And shockingly, her remains were found inside a Hello Kitty doll. The case was so disturbing, it shocked the entire city and became known as the Hello Kitty murder.